This is me against my King Master chess computer. This is level 72. I'm actually black this time. And we start out here with white, opening to e4, and I respond with the Sicilian c5. White brings out his knight, I bring out my knight. And he brings out his bishop here. Now, normally this knight would be pinned in this situation if it was like a queen pawn opening, for instance. But my knight is actually not pinned here, so that being the case, I move it to a better square for me, which is d4, because now I'm forking his knight and his bishop, basically forcing him to make this exchange here, which he does. And what that accomplished for me was that allowed me to bring my c-pawn up here to d4, which is a pretty commanding position for me this early in the game. So that was actually advantageous for me. Now, white's next move is a castle. That's not a very aggressive move, very conservative. I guess he was just getting it out of the way since he had already moved those two pieces, the bishop and the knight. But he probably could have gone with something a little more aggressive, especially to challenge this pawn I have here on d4. But he chose the castle instead, and that's fine. So now what I want to do is kind of try to take advantage of that. I've already got this d-pawn in the center of the board. That's good. Now I'm going to try to harass his bishop, basically causing him to waste moves on removing his bishop to another safer location. Meanwhile, I'm going to attempt to advance my pawns and try to develop my other pieces. So that's what I'm going for here. Unfortunately, I wasn't very familiar with this variation of the Sicilian, so I didn't know what he was setting me up for. Now clearly he's just baiting me into moving my b-pawn here, which I go ahead and do, because I didn't see white's next move, which is to capture my f-pawn and put my king in check, forcing me to make that exchange, which I have to do. But now my king is out of position, and that sets white up for his next move, which is to bring his queen out here to h5, put me in check. I can only do one thing to block it, which is move my g-pawn up. Technically I could have moved my king out, but that would have been an absolute disaster, so I'd rather just try to defend him and block the check. Now white is just setting me up for this fork here. So he now moves over here to d5, and now he puts me in check, and he forks my rook. So I block the check, obviously, with my e-pawn, which is pretty much all I could do, and he proceeds to take my rook. Now, he lost 2 points on the bishop exchange, but he gained 5 points back, so white is actually up 3 points now. My pawn structure is pretty crazy. White really hasn't done much in the way of development. So, I mean, obviously, it's as far as the way our pieces are developed or configured, it's it's pretty fair there. However, white is up 3 points, so that's definitely a disadvantage for me. The one thing that I have going for me was the fact that in order to make that fork happen, white had to move the same pieces a lot. He had to move his bishop 3 times, and he had to move his queen 3 times just to get from all the way down here all the way up here. So he's got his pieces out of position, and at this point forward, this is a very undesirable position for white to be in, because his queen is on one side of the board on the opposite corner of his king. So seeing that, my natural instinct is to attack his king. And knowing his queen's way over here, I'm going to basically try to force a kingside attack right now. So I do that by way of my h-pawn. Now you might think, well, that's definitely going against the opening principles here. I haven't developed either my bishops or my knight, yet I'm moving pawns. Well, by moving this pawn, not only am I going to be attacking with that pawn along this file, but I'm going to be attacking with the rook behind it. So the rook is more powerful than the bishop or the knight. So the best way for me to use that piece, instead of clearing these out, is to just clear a path forward with my pawn. So that's what I'm going for there. And my queen, my bishop can easily be brought out on one of these diagonals later, which will then, attack that h-pawn. So that's what I'm going for early here, and that's the idea I had.